Well, talk of a $50 billion valuation for Facebook and an IPO for Groupon valued at $15 billion puts visions of dollar signs in a venture capitalist's head. Silicon Valley has long been the birthplace of great ideas that spell big money, like Google and Apple. Well, now eyes are turning east to New York City and a reborn Silicon Alley, the #2 destination for tech venture capital. Bloomberg's Carole Zimmer kicks off our week-long series, The Race for the Next Facebook, with a look at why the next big idea might be launched from the East Coast.
Every month, about 850 people pack an auditorium at NYU, where 15 entrepreneurs get a chance to give quick pitches on their software apps.
Songs is a web radio.
Introspector is a search engine for all of your accounts on the web.
We at Solvate think freelancing's a lot like dating.
Their big hope is to bring investment capital to their door. Tonight, venture capitalists are in the audience checking out how much.
How much would someone have to pay you to lick a subway pole?
Upgo, which helps to create groups in Facebook. Hitmaker, which makes a game out of discovering and promoting music.
It's pretty awesome.
Plum Willow.
I can create outfits and shop with all my friends, just like as if I was at the mall.
And Fast Society.
We create temporary groups.
So far, New York has not produced a Google or a Facebook, but Foursquare, a website and iPhone app that allows you to keep tabs on your friends, made it big after being introduced at New York Tech Meetup. So did Tumblr, a site that provides users with a fast form of blogging. Meetup founder Nate Westheimer says entrepreneurs are now focusing on the application of technology, and that plays to the strength of the city.
What you see now is on the application layer, people in New York City who are more connected to businesses and consumers than anywhere else in the world. They're creating the next generation of startups, and that's happening here in New York.
It's also happening at so-called incubators that have sprouted up around the city in the past 3 years. Dogpatch Labs is sponsored by the Boston area firm Polaris Ventures, which has backed Jibe, a job site the firm expects to overtake Monster.com, and Sticky Bits.
Use Sticky Bits to scan any UPC or QR code.
Dogpatch offers free space and Wi-Fi with no strings attached. A frat house for geeks.
We're open 24/7. For the most part, it's a younger demographic. I think the youngest member is probably 24. I may be the oldest at 53.
27-year-old John Laramie says the frat house atmosphere encourages the sharing of ideas. His company, AdStruck, has so far raised $1.1 million in seed funding. Laramie says he's not in the race for the next Facebook, but he is hoping to take a chunk of the $6 billion billboard business.
We're not a sexy iPhone app. We're not a social network. We're a B2B business that just makes it more efficient to get involved in outdoor advertising.
Laramie says he's glad to be growing his company in the city that used to be known as the capital for book publishing, advertising, media, and the fashion industry. Now you can add tech innovation. Carole Zimmer, Bloomberg News.
Thatcher Bell is a principal at the firm, and he joins us now to discuss this. So New York, the East Coast, why do you think this is the place where the next great idea will hatch? Why is Silicon Alley being reborn here, in your opinion?
So just quick correction, we invested in Massive some time ago and exited a few years ago. Why do I think that Silicon Alley is experiencing a reemergence? I'm not sure that it is. I think that it's been developing momentum for a long time. I think it's getting noticed now because of startups like Foursquare and Etsy and AdStruck, which is one of our portfolio companies, and others, and because of the size of the New York Tech Meetup and some of the other organizations that really promote entrepreneurship and technology and venture capital and other forms of investing in the city. The other thing is that I think it's gotten much less expensive over time to start a technology company, particularly an internet-based technology company. And as a result, people who have a great idea for a new business that's technology-based have a much easier time finding financing to get that idea off the ground and to create a company. So you're seeing a lot of activity in New York and other places around starting companies. And for a variety of reasons, I think New York is particularly well positioned as such an environment for those entrepreneurs.
How is it different from Silicon Valley, though? I mean, what is the really, you talk about getting greater access to financing, but still people think of Silicon Valley.
Right. So I think it's different from Silicon Valley in many ways, and John Laramie's comment from AdStruck speaks to this. I think New York has the advantage of being...
And you're investing in
yes,
AdStruck, right?
Yeah. So New York has the advantage of being the epicenter epicenter for many different industries. There are people here, there are companies here in media, in financial services, in almost every industry who have their headquarters or a major presence here. If you're starting a company and you want to sell to them, or if you're starting a company and you want to sell to consumers, particularly in an urban environment like a company like Foursquare, et cetera, there's no better place to reach your customers than here in New York City. And that's not to say that you can't build a successful company somewhere else, but we're talking about applications as opposed to fundamental technologies. An environment like New York is particularly exciting for those companies and relevant.
What if you back up, though, and look at tech? You need software developers, you need engineers, and a number of different businesses. And I notice whenever I go to San Francisco, where we have our Bloomberg West office, there are always a million guys there that worked for Google or are working on Foursquare or have the next Facebook iPad app, whatever, before it's out. I mean, that's where they all sort of gravitate still, right?
I don't know if that's true. I think that we could certainly always use more developers in and around New York, at least for as long as I've been in the technology scene here. We could use more developers than we have. I'll say that up front. On the other hand, the number of developers who are here, folks in IT jobs, is much greater than most people realize. Depending on how you count them, if you look at a report like the Cyber Cities report, it's about the same or even greater than the number of people in Silicon Valley in those jobs. The thing is, they're locked up in big companies. That's number one. And we're doing our best in the startup world to entice them to come out and join startups. The other reality is that a lot of those folks, may not realize that amongst all of these other opportunities with big companies in so many industries in New York, there is a big, thriving technology scene in the startup world here. And so there's a lot of noise, as it were. Whereas on the West Coast, if you think about it, most of what's going on from an economic perspective has to do with technology companies. So there's a big scene here, but it's one of many big scenes.
I mean, do you see then, where we have, I guess, a viable Silicon Valley, obviously, and a viable Silicon Alley, and they're complementary in some way, Thatcher?
I think they are complementary in many ways, and I think that we're going to see more and more successes come out of both of those geographies and probably some others. They're complementary in that I think in New York, as we talked about, the bread and butter of New York is really applied technology. The bread and butter of the West Coast historically has been new technology, not necessarily its application, right? And I think that's not a black and white reality, but it's indicative of a lot of the new companies and new ideas you see come out of those two geographies.
We need to take a commercial break, but we want to come back. Thatcher, let me ask you, we all are so obsessed about Facebook and the valuation, Groupon and the valuation. What is kind of the next big thing? Is it Facebook, or cross that off the list? That's already been done.
I guess it depends on what you mean by the next big thing. From my perspective, we're early stage investors, so Facebook is pretty mature for us to think about as the next big thing. So that doesn't mean, though, that there's not a lot of potential left in social networking and social network-related businesses, for sure. And if you take a look at a New York-based company like Foursquare, for example, you'll see that potential playing out. Even that business now actually is pretty highly valued and pretty far along in its life in terms of the size of the network. But I think there are opportunities in a variety of sectors in the technology world and startups. I think.
What catches your interest when you see, like, you go to these tech startups or something, you see hundreds of people pitching ideas? What is the thing that you're kind of looking for that you find the most interesting?
Right. So this is going to sound like motherhood and apple pie a little bit, but we really look at a couple of things. We look at how big is the market opportunity really, and there are a couple of ways to measure that, but ultimately how much money is there to be made in a given market, and what's the team like? What's their background? Are they going to be world beaters, as it were? Do we think that they have what it takes to be a Mark Zuckerberg type of entrepreneur? And that's rare. But, we look at someone like John Laramade Adstruck. We look at folks like Mike Paolucci at Solvate, which is another company that was featured there, who is a serial entrepreneur as well. He founded Interactive Imaginations that became 24/7 Media. So you look at some of the history behind the team and what they have been able to accomplish so far and what their potential is going forward.
So maybe it's more about the people you're developing in than the actual ideas, right? Because John Laramie said, hey, we're not some sexy kind of social networking app for your iPad. It's a pretty basic B2B thing about more efficiently getting your ads on billboards.
Right. I think it's about both. But you notice when I mentioned, the team and the market, I didn't say the idea. The idea is important, but there are a lot of ideas. What's really important is executing that and being able to dodge and move along the way to take that initial idea and make it a very successful reality and company from the perspective of an investor.
Do you ever see an idea that you love, but a team that you maybe don't? And what can you do in that kind of situation?
We do, and there are really a couple of things that you can do. Because we're lucky that we get to see a lot of different opportunities, and there are a lot of different investment opportunities right now, and there have been for a while in New York, often we'll say, on to the next one. But occasionally we'll see a portion of a team and a market opportunity and idea that's attractive enough that will work with them to help them figure out what pieces of the team need to be augmented. Who else could we bring in to make this really a winning formula?
So when we say the next Facebook, is it probably an idea that we haven't even thought of at this point? What do you think?
So I think there are probably a number of big companies that are already small companies, both here on the East Coast, on the West Coast, and elsewhere. I'd like to think that some of them are in our portfolio, and there are some that are on their way and have the earmarks of a great success, like a Foursquare, an Etsy, a Gilt, maybe a Meetup, and then companies in our portfolio, maybe an AdStruck, although that one is very early still, but doing well.
Okay.
Mimeo, others.
So we'll have to stay tuned.
It's a long list.
All right, we're going to certainly keep an eye on it. Thatcher, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thatcher Bell of DFJ Gotham.